Hello and welcome to the Road to Westminster 2015. I'm Roshan Mohammed Salih. With 1 week to go before British General Election Day on May the 7th, we'll be assessing the state of the race, who will win the election and what will be the crucial issues that the public will vote on. The race seems tied between the Conservatives and Labour, who are both on around 33% of the popular vote. So with neither looking set to gain a parliamentary majority, one of them will probably have to do a deal with a smaller party to form a government. At the moment, it looks like the Scottish National Party will gain 40 seats in Parliament, whereas the Liberal Democrats will have around 20 to 25. This means that one of their leaders will be able to act as the kingmaker and decide if the next Prime Minister is Ed Miliband or David Cameron. But before we get into the ins and outs of what the next government will look like, here's Faiza Ahmed with a report on the issue that has dominated the election campaign so far, the state of the British economy.
At least 93,000 children in Britain are currently homeless, and more than 4,000 homeless families in London have been waiting 2 years or more to get permanent homes, according to figures released by Shelter, a UK-based charity. The Yusufi family are just one example. They found themselves homeless after being evicted by their landlord. Struggling to make ends meet, the family of four were moved into a small one-bedroom flat by the council and have been living there for 2 years.
There is a dump here. It's plenty damp, and sincerely, it's too small for a family, this flat. Second things, we've got plenty of mouse everywhere in the kitchen and here as well. And the children, they're scared to sleep here.
It's dirty. Even they bring a sofa, look. They bring a sofa, they bring it from outside to us. We are animal or what? We are a human and we have rights.
A rodent infestation and dampness are not the only problems they face. They're all forced to sleep in one bedroom.
I can't sleep like that because there's something that is stamping up in here because I can't even sleep. And my brother, his bed is broken and I can't get in because I really want to play with him.
Unable to move his young boys to nearby schools due to long waiting lists, Murad has found that his ability to work has been severely affected.
I can't go, for example, to work. Sincerely, I want to be honest with you. Because my wife, she works in part-time job, okay? That's fine. But the day she go to work, how can I do with the children? It's not easy.
Britain has been engulfed in a housing crisis for a number of years, and this will be a key issue for many voters in the next election. Experts have warned that the crisis has created a number of problems, including a breakdown in families, reduced mobility and a destruction of employment prospects.
In the run-up to May the 7th, the Conservatives say living standards are higher than they were and that wages are growing. However, Labour begs to differ, saying people are worse off and living standards have fallen for 5 years.
There's no jobs, there's no prospects. We have housing to deal with, we've got children to look after, and to be honest, it's very hard.
Small businesses are failing, they're closing everywhere. But bankers, traders, big businessmen, they're all going up, they're all making the money. We're sitting here struggling. With voting, every year I would vote Labour, but personally this year, I'd probably go Green. Not for the sake that I want them to win, for the sake that the others don't deserve my vote.
So will a change in leadership make a dramatic difference to the economy?
Governments make big promises. They make big statements, but when they get into power, will they keep to their promises? I mean, look at the last government we had. That was a Labour government under Tony Blair. And we had one of the most capitalist governments we had. And will Miliband do anything differently from what their former predecessors did? I don't think so.
Despite claims of economic recovery, figures reveal over 900,000 adults and children have received 3 days emergency food in the last 12 months. With such conflicting accounts, the debate over the state of the economy rages on. Faiza Ahmed, Road to Westminster.
To discuss what's likely to happen on voting day next Thursday, and indeed after that, we have two guests with us in the studio. Andrew Boff is the leader of the Greater London Authority Conservative Group, which helps scrutinise the work of the Mayor of London. He was also formerly the leader of Hillingdon Council. And David Nummy is a businessman and a Scottish National Party supporter. David was born and brought up in Glasgow, but has been living in London for the past 20 years. Thank you for coming in today, gentlemen. Andrew, if I could start with you. A very direct question. What's going to happen on May the 7th? Who's going to win? What's the new government going to look like?
The Conservatives are going to win, and I think we're going to have just about a majority.
The polls aren't exactly showing that, are they?
No, but I think that there's some dynamics in this election which aren't being taken into account. First of all, it's the prospect that that a vote for Labour is effectively a vote for an SNP and splitting up the United Kingdom, and all the instability that comes from two parties trying to run a government but who won't talk to each other. And it also, people's minds will start to concentrate on what they could be throwing away if they fail to support the Conservatives.
So you really expect a massive swing in the last week? The polls haven't been indicating that, Andrew, at all.
I do, yes. And I think when it comes to people actually committing their vote on the day, they tend to be quite responsible. By-elections, for example, people tend to play with their vote a little, and it's all about the heart and everything.
Yeah.
When they come to vote in a general election, they know they're choosing the government.
I mean, I think the prospect of a Conservative win might be feasible, but a majority government, I mean, they're way off that in the polls.
Yeah. You know, I certainly don't go out knocking on doors and canvassing and pushing leaflets through doors on the basis that I want a minority government. I want us to win. I mean, if we don't, then that's a whole different ball game, and we have to start talking about what we can get through from any arrangement.
So you'll cross that bridge when you come to it.
Absolutely.
In terms of the campaign so far, I mean, there's a widespread acknowledgement that the Conservative campaign has been quite lacklustre, and David Cameron hasn't resonated with the voters.
I think it's quite difficult because we've been trying to point out to the electors is the danger of throwing this economic legacy away. We've spent 5 years going through really tough times, and everybody's felt it. The economy has been knocked sideways by what the Labour Party left us with in 2010. It's been really difficult to recover it. We've all suffered as a result. Now the trouble is we could throw that all away and go back to square one. And so it's been quite difficult to be positive when there's that fear. I think, however, the positivity will now come to creep back into the campaign.
David, what's going to happen on May the 7th?
Ultimately, who knows? But the polls, I tend to agree with you. The polls are saying there is not going to be an easy winner. It's going to be very, very tight. It may be that the SNP is in a position to really be working hard to get a Labour government, and we think.
Are you going to hold that Labour government to ransom over, I don't know, austerity, Trident, things like that?
No, we're going to behave reasonably. You know, I mean, most SNP people, we still live in the UK. We want the UK to succeed as well as Scotland.
Do you? Do you care about England and Wales and Northern Ireland? I thought you just cared about Scotland.
Of course I did. You know, my wife is English, my son is English, and my best mate is English. For anyone to start accusing us of being anti-English, it's just silly stuff. You know, loads of Scottish people live in England, loads of English people live in Scotland, and quite a few of them voted yes in the referendum last year.
But the majority of voters are basically in England, aren't they?
Yeah.
So the prospect of Nicola Sturgeon kind of bringing down governments from Scotland, that's not something that particularly goes down well with a lot of English voters, right?
Well, ultimately, we will only be in that position if a lot of people have voted for us. If voters in England aren't really feeling they can totally trust the Conservatives or totally trust Labour, and the SNP or another smaller party are in a position where they hold the balance of power, you'd expect them to argue for what they believe in, which, you know, for us would be, you know, an end to blanket austerity, looking very seriously at Trident, you know. And obviously we want more powers devolved to the Scottish Parliament.
We're going to move on in a second, but Andrew, I noticed that when you were watching that report, you were shaking your head. Why were you shaking your head?
Well, there were some factual errors in there. For example, the report with regard to the people who are using food banks has proved to be quite fictitious. The million figure that they talked about, or the 900,000 figure.
There are a lot of food banks in
There are a lot of food banks, and I'm not saying they don't happen, but putting that 900,000 figure is ridiculous, because that's 900,000 visits by double visits. So actually the figure, that figure is half that, and not only that, the visit amounted to 2 or 3 times a year for the vast majority of those.
Still unacceptable, though.
It's still unacceptable.
Like Britain, right?
It's absolutely unacceptable. But what's brilliant is the number of people like the Trussell Trust who are helping the poorest people in our society to feed themselves.
I'm going to have to cut you off, Andrew, because we're going to move on. Our reporter, Faiza Ahmed, has been trying to break down the rather confusing electoral picture that as we head into polling day next week. Here's what she came up with.
The uncertainty surrounding the general election remains at an all-time high. With all the party manifesto launches and leaders' debates out of the way, polls are showing the race is too close to call. Current evidence points to a hung parliament, but who will be the next Prime Minister and what will the next government look like? Since the start of the year, the two main parties have been neck and neck in most opinion polls, at around 33% of the vote, with neither establishing a sustained lead exceeding the typical 3 percentage point margin of error. Now, there are 650 seats in Parliament, and a single party needs to win more than half to form a majority government. But neither the Conservatives nor Labour are likely to achieve that. According to figures published by the pollsters YouGov, Labour are predicted to pick up 277 seats, with the Conservatives at 270, followed by the Scottish National Party with 50 seats, making the SNP the third largest party in the UK. Now, as you can see on the map, the Labour Party appears to be gathering more support from the northern regions of England, whereas the Conservatives remain popular in the south. Data has also shown that there will probably be seat transfers in the House of Commons. SNP gains in Scotland will be at the cost of Labour. UKIP's projected seat gains are modest, but will mostly be at the expense of the Conservatives. But the Conservatives can expect to pick up some seats from the Liberal Democrats. So as things stand, a hung parliament is by far the likeliest outcome, with Labour looking for support from either the Liberal Democrats or the SNP to form a government, while the Conservatives may decide to team up with UKIP and the DUP Unionists in Northern Ireland.
Andrew, the party you support, the Conservatives, their pitch to the electorate is that the economy is improving. Yeah. It's going in the right direction. Yet, the figures might bear that out a little bit in terms of unemployment, going down and wages perhaps going up a little bit, but our ordinary people don't seem to be feeling it. They think that the economy is going well for the rich, for the bankers, for the City of London, but the ordinary people on the street are not feeling this recovery.
I think it's absolutely undeniable that everybody has had to go through this, and it has been tough. But actually, the prospects are there. The jobs are there. There are more people in work now. There are fewer people claiming benefits. There has been a real sea change in the number of people who've being able to stand on their own 2 feet. So there is a real progress here. And I won't say it's modest, because it's been remarkable progress. Our growth figures are now by far greater than anybody else in the G7 of any other European country. We really are starting to become again the motor.
But whoever wins, if you win or whoever is Prime Minister next, Ed Miliband or David Cameron, you're both basically still offering austerity, aren't you?
You're absolutely right. I mean,
more austerity.
Well, I'm afraid so. There's until about 2017-18. Yes, absolutely. We are still in a situation where we are paying, we are borrowing to pay for current expenditure. It's not something that can continue. And for those parties that say, as some of those parties that have got elected in Europe, in Greece, for example, who say we don't want austerity. Yeah. It's like voting against arithmetic. We simply haven't got the money to be able to not do austerity.
David, it looks like the SNP are going to wipe Labour out in Scotland, and generally we see this decline of the traditional parties, support for traditional parties. Why is that? Why is Labour going to be completely wiped out?
I think there's a lack of trust in the Labour Party. I think that's a big factor in Scotland. The Tories haven't really been trusted in Scotland for quite a long time now. I think the danger for Labour is that a lot of people are totally losing faith in Labour as well. So people are looking for alternatives. The Greens have been doing significantly well. There is, unfortunately from my point of view, a rise in support for UKIP, and the SNP have also been doing well. I don't totally agree that there might be as big a shift to the SNP as you're looking at. I think there will be some tactical voting in Scotland by unionists.
But around 40 seats, you think they'll get?
I would be jumping about if we got 40. I think possibly a bit less than that we're looking at.
But still the third largest party in Parliament, given that the Lib Dems are going to go right down to about 20.
That's absolutely what we want. To be the third party would be absolutely brilliant, and we feel we could certainly offer some support to Labour in putting forward a programme that gave some alternatives to austerity.
So you're talking up a Labour SNP coalition already?
I think it's unlikely to be a coalition, but we're willing to be supportive to anyone who's doing anything that will make a non-Tory government.
Andrew?
It'll be chaos, won't it? Because the reason that the government that we've just stood down has been so successful is at the start of the coalition a programme was sorted out and an agreement that was between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats about a programme for government. What we're going to have if we get a Labour SNP arrangement is the SNP voting on every single individual issue. There'll be no consistency whatsoever, and you'll have Ed Miliband, who keeps telling us that he's not going to talk to Nicola Sturgeon, he's not going to talk to the SNP, trying to deliver a minority government, but not trying to do deals with the SNP. Of course he's going to do deals with the SNP, and the result is...
Well, but you guys are going to do deals with UKIP and the DUP in Northern Ireland, aren't you, if you come to power?
I doubt it very much, because we don't particularly need them. I mean, UKIP's... I mean, to be honest, I think UKIP will lose a seat. They won't gain any more. They are thinly spread over the country amongst people who are really using it as a protest. The SNP is much more likely to get a huge support in Scotland.
David, before we move on, I just want to say, I mean, this election, has it turned you on at all? Has it engaged the voters, do you think, or a bit lacklustre, a bit boring?
I'm not really sure the voters in England are that engaged with it. You know, I think they're losing trust in the two major parties. The Greens are doing quite well. In Scotland, I think there's a slightly different thing in that I think there's quite a lot of trust in the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon, and I think you might see a significantly higher turnout in Scotland.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to move on now because we want to go to the video wall now because we're going to look at a few headlines and Facebook posts that we've been receiving. The first one from The Guardian, UK economic growth halves ahead of general election. So as I said, the Conservative pitch to the voters is that the economy is safe in our hands. We have 0.3% growth in the last quarter. It was predicted to be 0.5%. But David Cameron's still saying that you know, the economy is safe in our hand. That seems to kind of go a bit against his pitch, right?
It absolutely proves that the economy isn't fixed yet, and that to abandon the long-term economic plan would be madness. Because because I think Labour's trying to say, oh, it's fixed now and it's fine, and so if you vote for Labour and we can increase taxation, you'll be fine. You won't be.
David, I mean, Andrew said a lot of times that they're going in the right direction. Conservatives are fixing it. Your response to that?
Well, we've had austerity for 5 years. It's been a disaster. Some of the social cost of austerity has been awful, the bedroom tax, welfare benefits. People accept that the Tories have been very, very tough on benefits, but actually public debt is still rising and the deficit has not been eliminated. So how effective?
But you guys would still cut, wouldn't you, but less quickly, right?
No, we want actually sensible investment in job creation and employment generating activities, things that have a long-term future, not just giveaways to people that are already loaded.
Yeah, but let's look at that bedroom tax issue. The family that was featured in overcrowded conditions,
appalling conditions,
absolutely appalling conditions. How is it that we should be paying for people to have spare rooms in their homes when that family is overcrowded? There are 330,000 children being brought up in overcrowded conditions in London, and allowing people to maintain spare rooms where they can put their, I don't know, the running machine they advisedly built.
Lots of empty homes in London as well.
It's a real problem. Okay. And so, I mean, they knock the bedroom tax, but you talk to people in overcrowded conditions, and it's helping them.
We want to get to some Facebook posts now that our viewers have been sending in to us. Sylvia from the UK, I'm from England, and even I can see how the Scottish people were tricked during the independence referendum. Now is your chance to set things right. And also, I think we've got another one also praising the SNP from one of our viewers. Leslie from the UK, Nicola Sturgeon showed exactly why the SNP are rolling high in the polls. She spoke with authority but also humility. I think this is referring to an election debate. She is head and shoulders above all the other leaders. Scotland is all the better for having this lady as First Minister, and she'll be a formidable force in negotiations after May the 7th. You must be delighted to see that.
People in
David.
Scotland have known for 10 years that Nicola Sturgeon is a smart cookie. People in the rest of the UK are just finding out now.
She has been the star of the campaign, hasn't she, Boff? Opposer or even not, you know?
She's come over very well, and she's shown Labour voters in Scotland that there is an alternative to wasting their vote with Ed Miliband. But I think the Conservative, we may even have a situation in Scotland where we overtake the Labour Party in the number of seats as a result of this.
You know, looking at the map, it does seem a very divided nation, doesn't it? Kind of Conservatives in the south, Labour in the northern, in the middle, in the northern areas of England, and SNP in the north. Very divided country now.
Well, that's been with us for a long time. It's been with us for a long time, and it's an issue that's faced both Labour and Conservative parties. When we're strong, we still don't touch in some of the urban areas in the north, and when the Labour Party is strong, they don't get to some of the areas in the south. The difference is the SNP, of course. That's who's created the real difference in this
Historically, the first past the post system was a disaster for us because we had a very spread of support throughout Scotland. What has happened is our support has gone up. We've finally hit a tipping point, and Labour MPs are likely to go down like dominoes. That doesn't mean that I particularly support the first past the post system, because I think it does create some problems.
I think we can go to the final headline really briefly before we finish the show. A general election 2015, prospect of Labour SNP coalition makes 1 in 4 voters less likely to support Ed Miliband. So this poll is basically saying that you know, the Conservatives are obviously perhaps what some might say scaring English voters who might vote UKIP into saying that, you know, this Labour SNP coalition is going to be a disaster. That tactic seems to be working, doesn't it, David?
Whether or not it's working, I still think it's a scandal. Nicola Sturgeon has clearly been attempted to have been smeared at least once by reports of a conversation she had with the French consulate, and that was just an absolute nonsense. English voters have no reason to be scared of Nicola Sturgeon. She's an English granny. Loads of Scots live in England.
She's only about 43 or something, isn't she? Or something like that. She's already a granny.
No, she has an English granny.
Oh, sorry. Okay, right.
No.
Forget what I just said.
But yeah, there's no reason to be scared of Nicola Sturgeon. She's a competent politician, and she's interested in benefits for the whole of the UK, not just Scotland.
Should the English be scared of Nicola Sturgeon?
I think they should. I mean, she did a super performance, and she's very feisty, and she puts her case over terribly well, and she's entertaining. But you've got to actually look. I mean, this thing about never dealing with the Tories, that's for a domestic audience, because her intention is to take Labour votes.
Oh, she might deal with the Tories, you feel?
She's dealt with the Tories. It was only the Tories that managed to give her the majority that the SNP needed for their budget when they were in minority in Scotland. It was a deal with the Tories in Scotland that delivered that. So let's take with a pinch of salt her quote that she will never deal with the Tories.
David,
actually, she would.
I'll give you the final word
I
in
don't
30
think
seconds.
that's the case. I think Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond proved that when they were running a Scottish minority government, they were able to deal with everyone. And actually, they're much better placed in terms of understanding how a minority government and a coalition would operate, because they've got loads of experience.
But David, that includes dealing with the Tories.
Well,
to reject it is silly.
Okay, but I think it's clear that a lot of our thoughts tend to lie more closely to the Greens and the Labour Party in general. The Conservatives have been a disaster for
All right,
Scotland.
lots of disagreement here today, but we're going to have to leave it there, guys. Thank you very much for your views. Okay, that's all we've got time for today. But before we go, I just want to say that on Election Day, May the 7th next week, we'll be doing a special live show, and we're looking for you to join us in the studio to share your views with Amina Taylor, who will be presenting. So if you live in London and if you want to air your opinions on international television, come to our studio and give us your take on the elections. Contact us using the details on the screen. You can like our page on Facebook and then send us a message and we'll get back to you, or you can send us a tweet. As always, you can also continue the discussion on our Twitter page. Stay tuned to Press TV. See you next week on Election Day. Bye-bye.